Have you ever stopped to wonder how we have any rules at all in a world with almost 200 countries and 8 billion people? I mean, who's in charge? Well, today we're going to unpack that exact question.
Seriously, think about it. There's no world president, no global parliament that passes laws for everyone. So how do we get laws that cross borders, governing everything from the deep sea to human rights? It's a really fascinating puzzle.
You see, the secret isn't some giant single rule book. Nope. Instead, international law is pieced together from a whole collection of different sources. The best way to think about it is like a toolkit, where lawyers and judges have to find just the right tool for the job. So let's open up that toolkit and see what's inside.
Okay, we're going to start with the two heavyweights, the absolute bedrock of the entire system, treaties and customs. These are by far the oldest and most important tools in the kit.
First up, treaties. Now, this is the official definition from the Vienna Convention, which is kind of the rulebook for rulebooks. But put simply, a treaty is just a formal agreement between countries. It's really just like a contract, but for nations.
But here's where it gets interesting. Not all treaties are created equal. On one side, you've got these huge lawmaking treaties, like the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which sets rules for pretty much every country on how to use the oceans. On the other side, you have treaty contracts, which are more like a specific deal between just a handful of countries. But, and this is the really cool part, if enough countries start making similar little treaty contracts over and over again, they can actually evolve into a new global standard.
All right, let's grab the second foundational tool, custom. This stuff is way older than any written treaty. A custom isn't just a habit, something countries do. It's a practice they follow because they genuinely believe they are legally required to do it. That belief, that's the magic ingredient that turns a routine into a rule.
So how does that even happen? Well, it's a process. First, you just see a bunch of countries acting in the same consistent way over a long time. Then their diplomats talk. Their relationships reinforce it. And then you hit this tipping point, step 3, where it's no longer just what we do, it becomes what we must do. And just like that, a new unwritten rule of international law is born.
Okay, so we've got written agreements, treaties, and unwritten rules, customs. But what happens when neither of those gives you an answer? Well, that brings us to the next layer of tools in our kit, the ones designed to fill in the gaps.
Just imagine you're a judge at the International Court of Justice. You've got a tough case in front of you, but there's no treaty on point and no clear custom. What do? You can't just throw your hands up. Instead, you look for these basic, fundamental principles of justice that are recognized in legal systems all across the globe.
This quote really nails the idea. We're talking about principles so common, so fundamental, that they pop up in legal systems everywhere. Think of it as the shared legal DNA of nations, the basic common sense of the global legal community.
And here are a couple of great examples. Res judicata. You probably know it as double jeopardy. The idea that you can't be tried for the same crime twice. That's a core principle almost everywhere. Or how about estoppel? That's just a fancy legal way of saying you can't go back on your word. If you make a promise and someone else relies on it, you're estopped from changing your tune. These universal ideas help patch the holes in international law.
So, we have the written rules and the unwritten rules. But rules don't interpret themselves, right? That brings us to our next set of tools, the interpreters who help us figure out what the law actually means out here in the real world.
Now, this is a really crucial point. Courts and legal experts, they don't just invent new laws out of thin air. Their job is to help. They look at the treaties, the customs, and the general principles that already exist and help us understand how they apply to a specific and usually very messy situation.
And here's the cast of characters. You've got the big one, the International Court of Justice. But you also have special tribunals set up for one-off disputes, like the famous Alabama claims case between the US and the UK way back in the 1800s. Even decisions from a country's own courts or the writings of top legal scholars can be used as evidence to figure out what international law says.
Okay, I want you to look at this slide for a second. Article 59. It's from the rulebook of the International Court of Justice, and it contains a little detail that completely flips what most of us think about how top courts work.
And there it is. Unlike, say, the U.S. Supreme Court, a decision by the ICJ is technically only binding on the countries involved in that one case. There's no formal rule of precedent. Now, in reality, its decisions are hugely influential, and everyone pays close attention, but it's a critical distinction. The court isn't a global lawmaker.
That brings us to our final and probably the fastest evolving source of international law, the big global institutions.
Over the last century, organizations like the United Nations, the World Health Organization, you name it, have become huge players. They're not just places where countries come to talk anymore. They are actively shaping and even creating the rules of the game.
So how do they do it? Well, this chart gives you a quick look. They set their own internal procedures, sure, but they also issue decisions that can be binding on all their members. Think of a UN Security Council resolution. And just by doing their work, their actions can help new customs and practices emerge over time. They're a really dynamic force in shaping the law today.
So let's pull all these threads together. What have we learned about this global legal toolkit? Well, the single most important thing to remember is that it is not just sitting on a shelf somewhere collecting dust.
Here it is, the whole toolkit in one place. You've got the written deals, the unwritten rules, the basic standards of fairness, the expert interpretations, and the modern rule shapers. And the key is that none of these work alone. They all weave together, influencing and shaping each other to form the global rulebook.
And that, right there, is the main takeaway. International law isn't some fixed set of ancient commandments. It's a living, breathing system that is constantly arguing with itself, adapting, and evolving to meet new challenges.
Which leads us to one final really important question. As we face these massive, borderless problems, pandemics, climate change, AI, which of these tools from our toolkit are we going to rely on the most? Will we need more formal treaties? Will new unwritten customs emerge fast enough? Or will it be the big international organizations that take the lead? The answer to that is going to define the world we live in.